Is that you, Benno?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. We'll try to wake you up a little bit here. All right, good afternoon. Just want to, I can't speak this morning. Just want to flag to you that at 1:30 p.m., the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the People's Republic of China, Mr. Wang Yi, will be delivering a statement at the Security Council stakeout. On Wednesday, which will be tomorrow, the Secretary General will attend the 48th annual regular meeting of the Conference of Heads of Government of the Caribbean Community, better known as CARICOM. He will speak at the opening ceremony, which will take place tomorrow evening in Bridgetown in Barbados, underscoring the conference's theme this year, Strength in Unity, which is truly a theme for our times. The Secretary General is expected to highlight three key areas where together we must drive progress: peace and security, the climate crisis, and sustainable development. On Thursday, the Secretary General will have a closed session with CARICOM heads of government to exchange views on the pressing situations in the region, including Haiti. While in Bridgetown, the Secretary General will hold a bilateral meeting with Prime Minister Mia Mottley of Barbados. He will also meet with other leaders on the margins of the conference. We will keep you updated on that. We'll share remarks ahead of time with you. The Secretary General will leave New York very early tomorrow morning, and he will be back in New York on Thursday. Here, the Secretary General spoke at today's Security Council meeting on multilateralism and improving global governance. He said that we have the hardware for international cooperation, but the software needs an update. He said the Pact for the Future adopted in September is aimed at strengthening global governance for the 21st century and rebuilding trust in multilateralism, trust in the United Nations, and trust in this very Council. The Secretary General noted that the pact recognizes that the Security Council must reflect the world of today and not the world of 80 years ago. It also sets out important principles to guide this long-awaited reform. The Council should be enlarged and made more representative of today's geopolitical realities, the Secretary General said. He also urged Security Council members to continue working on overcoming differences and focus on building the consensus required to deliver peace for all people. Turning to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, our peacekeeping colleagues tell us that the security situation in North Kivu and South Kivu remains highly volatile. In North Kivu, the mission continues to shelter and protect some 1,400 people in its premises in Goma. The M23 has demanded that protected individuals within the mission's bases be handed over to them and publicly accused the mission of releasing armed Congolese army members to attack civilians. Yesterday, a large crowd of protesters gathered outside the mission's lava site, but the protesters in the end dispersed relatively peaceful. Our humanitarian partners also report that in recent days, multiple displacement sites have been vandalized and looted. Nearly 56,000 displaced persons have relocated to 34 newly established collective centers across Goma, primarily schools, churches, and hospitals. Meanwhile, an estimated 390,000 men, women, and children remain in existing displacement sites in and around the city. There's also been severe damage to infrastructure. At least 80 schools and 27 health centers were vandalized or destroyed, disrupting education and healthcare access. Nearly 400,000 students have been affected by the recent fighting in the city of Goma and its surroundings. In Jugu territory in Ituri, the violence has forced humanitarian partners to suspend their activities, disrupting assistance to at least 30,000 people. And in South Kivu, humanitarian partners reported widespread looting also in various parts of the city of Bukavu over the weekend, including a World Food Program warehouse. Several churches and collective centers are reportedly hosting displaced families. Meanwhile, health authorities also highlighted the risk of mpox spread in South Kivu, as many people under treatment fled treatment centers, I also want to flag yet another tragic example of the risk of unexploded ordnance. In Kalehe territory, which is in South Kivu, 2 children were killed by unexploded ordnances. Immediate efforts to clear these hazards is critical for the protection of civilians. And as a reminder, our peacekeeping mission withdrew from South Kivu in June of last year in accordance with the disengagement plan agreed to with the Congolese authorities and requested by the Security Council. I also want to add that UN Refugee Agency today says that between 10,000 and 15,000 people have crossed from the DRC into Burundi over the last few days, fleeing, of course, the escalating violence in the eastern part of the country. And on human rights, our colleagues from the Human Rights Office said today they've confirmed cases of summary executions of children by the M23 after they entered the city of Bukavu last week. These are pretty disturbing reports, to say the least. OHCHR has also received information about arbitrary arrests and detention, degrading treatment, and alleged forced returns of Congolese young men fleeing violence in neighboring countries. They've also received reports that journalists, human rights defenders, and members of civil society organizations have been threatened or forced to leave the area. Turning to Sudan, I can tell you that we are alarmed by the reports of large-scale violence in different parts of the country. More than 150 people were reportedly killed in an attack on El Kutaina town in White Nile State on Sunday. These were horrifying reports that dozens of women were raped and hundreds of families were forced to flee. At the same time, in North Darfur, OCHA also warns that civilians in and around Zamzam displacement camp continue to face grave threats to their safety due to the ongoing fighting. At least 17 civilians were reportedly killed. That's at least what initial estimates are telling us, with many more wounded in the attack that took place yesterday. Shelling reportedly destroyed parts of the main market in Zamzam, which is the primary source of supplies for residents in the camp. And as a reminder, Zamzam is one of the areas in Sudan where famine has emerged. Following the escalation in North Darfur's capital, El Fasher, and surrounding areas, people have been seeking safety and shelter in Ad-Dababa in the northern state. State authorities report that more than 3,100 people from North Darfur, mostly older people, wounded people, and others with chronic diseases, have arrived in Ad-Dababa in less than 2 months. Meanwhile, our Human Rights Office found that entrenched impunity is fueling gross human rights violations and abuses in Sudan as fighting spreads to more parts of the country and involves additional groups. The report also calls for a broader international effort towards accountability to stem the flow of arms. The High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, said the continued and deliberate attacks on civilians and civilian objects, as well as summary executions, sexual violence, and other violations and abuses, underscore the utter failure by both parties to respect the rules and principles of international law and international human rights law. Turning to the situation, particularly in East Jerusalem, you will have seen that Philippe Lazzarini, the Commissioner General of UNRWA, said today that Israeli forces and personnel from the Jerusalem municipality have forcefully entered UNRWA Kalandia training center and ordered its immediate evacuation. At least 350 students and 30 staff were present and were affected. Tear gas and sound bombs were fired. Also this morning, he said Israeli police officers accompanied by staff members from the municipality went to UNRWA schools and ordered their closures. Today's incident impacted 250 students in 3 UNRWA schools in East Jerusalem and the 350 in Kalandia Training Center. I've been asked for the Secretary General's own reaction, and I can tell you that the Secretary General strongly condemns the breach of inviolability of United Nations premises in occupied East Jerusalem, including, of course, the UNRWA Kalandia Training Center and the attempt to forcibly enter 3 UNRWA schools and seek their closure. The use of tear gas and sound bombs in educational environments while students are learning is both unnecessary and unacceptable. This is a clear violation of Israel's obligation under international law, including obligations concerning the privileges and immunities of the UN and its personnel. The inviolability of United Nations premises must be respected at all times. The internal law of Israel does not alter international legal obligations, nor can it provide any justification for their breach. Meanwhile, our humanitarian colleagues tell us that in Gaza, since the ceasefire took effect, more than 57,000 metric tons of food have been brought into Gaza, and distribution of that assistance is ongoing. Meanwhile, the Food and Agriculture Organization has provided 550 metric tons of animal feed to more than 2,000 families with livestock in Gaza. In the north, UNRWA said it's distributed about 2,500 tents over the last 2 days. Further south in Khan Yunis, partners working to support water, sanitation, hygiene finished rehabilitating 3 desalination plants on Sunday, providing some 76,000 people with access to clean water. Across the Gaza Strip, 10 field labs are actively managing water quality and providing critical support to public health. Meanwhile, we and our partners continue to support primary and secondary healthcare services. More than 200,000 patients benefit from these services every week. And turning to the West Bank, OCHA says casualties continue to be reported due to ongoing operations by the Israeli security forces in Tulkarem and Jenin. Today, a child died due to injuries sustained in an airstrike in Jenin almost 2 weeks ago. In the Tulkarem refugee camp, Israeli authorities reportedly announced that over a dozen houses are to be demolished. OCHA also reports that Palestinians continue to be displaced on a large scale due to operations by Israeli security forces, as well as by home demolitions and movement restrictions. This further deepens their humanitarian needs. I want to flag a statement by Mohamed Hadi, our resident humanitarian coordinator for the occupied Palestinian territory. He said that the recently published interim rapid damage and needs assessment report for the Gaza Strip and the West Bank shows that $53.2 billion is needed for recovery and reconstruction over the next decade, with Gaza sustaining the vast majority of destruction. This overall figure reflects total estimated physical infrastructure damage around $29.9 billion, economic and social losses around $19.1 billion, and service restoration and other recovery needs. Mr. Hadi said Palestinians still need joint action to address the immense recovery and reconstruction challenges ahead. We stand ready to support the Palestinian people both on humanitarian assistance and a future recovery and reconstruction process, he added. And moving north to Lebanon, as you well know, today marks the end of the period set for the withdrawal of Israeli Defense Forces south of the Blue Line and parallel Lebanese armed forces deployment to positions in southern Lebanon as envisaged by the cessation of hostilities understanding agreed to on 26 November of last year. Our peacekeeping colleagues in Lebanon report that the Lebanese armed forces continue to deploy to southern Lebanon with the active support of UNIFIL, while displaced communities also return to their homes. The Lebanese armed forces continue to dispose of unauthorized weapons that they find and that UNIFIL find also, and all that is taking place in the UNIFIL area of operations. As you will have seen in a joint statement issued earlier today, the Special Coordinator for Lebanon, Janine Hennis-Plasschaert, and the UNIFIL head of mission, Lieutenant General Aroldo Lazzaro, called on both parties to meet their obligations so that a sense of safety among communities in southern Lebanon and northern Israel will be restored. Meanwhile, we remain committed to supporting the parties to uphold their respective obligations. And just to last note, Hans Grunberg, our special envoy for Yemen, today urged all Yemenis to keep the doors to dialogue open and prioritize national interest over factional divides. In a closing session of the third Yemen International Forum, which took place in Jordan, in Amman, Mr. Grunberg warned that the risk of military escalation within Yemen is increasing, threatening to deepen suffering and set back efforts towards peace. The humanitarian crisis is severe and political divisions persist, he said, yet this forum demonstrated that there is both expertise and determination to confront these challenges. He reiterated there are constant calls and demands for the immediate and unconditional release of all those arbitrarily held by the Houthi authorities. Edie, and no money today, and then Ibtisam.
A couple of follow-ups, Steph. First, you said that China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi was going to make a statement.
Yeah.
Does that mean he's not going to
I
be
don't know.
taking questions?
That's what we were asked to flag by the Chinese mission, so I can't, I can only tell you what I said. I don't know.
Okay, on the M23, does the UN know whether the fighters are advancing beyond Bukavu?
Short answer is I don't have any reports of further advancements.
And on Mr. Hadi, who was supposed to be here today,
Yes,
are
I
we
know.
going to?
Yes, we're trying to reschedule that. He had a scheduling conflict, an actual scheduling conflict.
And and was Sigrid Kaag involved in the preparation of this estimate?
I don't know if she was involved in the preparation of the estimate. I know she has been, I can find that granular detail. She's been meeting with, I know, with Egyptian and Jordanian authorities in the last few days, and will be back in Jerusalem either later today or tomorrow. Ibtisam Azam.
Thank you. A follow-up on UNRWA schools. So the question, what is the UN going to do about it, and what's happened to the children who visit these schools?
Well, let me put it this way, it's an unfolding situation. My understanding is that our colleagues in Jerusalem will meet with Israeli authorities tomorrow to obviously protest vigorously what has happened. What is clear is that under international law, Israel, as the occupying power, has the responsibility to take over education and health services if it's not allowing UNRWA to do so. But we will find out a bit more about what actually is happening to those schools.
Are there other schools, UN schools, that still operating, or?
There are other programs that are still ongoing, yeah.
And on the West Bank and this, I think the last number I saw was about 40,000 Palestinians were displaced in the West Bank. The question is whether you have other numbers or update, and are the people, I mean, where are they going, and who's giving, are they getting any assistance by the UN?
They're going to other places in the West Bank. We are trying, whether it's UNRWA or OCHA or others, are trying to provide services, basic services, wherever they are, giving kind of whatever emergency aid that they need, whether that's cash aid or material aid. But our colleagues are very much following the population movement and trying to help them wherever they are.
On Sudan and Zamzam camp, do you have any numbers regarding mortalities or?
In terms from the hunger crisis?
Yeah,
no, we'll ask
famine,
WFP.
yes.
Yep. Iftikhar.
Yes. Following up on Edie's question regarding M23.
Your microphone, please.
Thank you, Steph. Following up on Edie's question on M23 and Goma, given the critical situation, is there any plan or any talk about beefing up MONUSCO?
Well, listen, MONUSCO's mandate and disengagement plan is clear. Right now, the situation is such that MONUSCO has very little, if any, freedom of movement, which flies against Security Council resolution. I don't think it's a matter of beefing up MONUSCO. It's a matter of the Congolese state restoring its authority over its own territory. Dennis, please, sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. According to the Russian Foreign Ministry statement, Russia and the US in Saudi Arabia have reached an agreement to resume communication channels on a number of issues, considering their special responsibility as nuclear
Russia and
powers.
Saudi Arabia, you said?
No, Russia and the US.
And the US, in the meeting, okay, yeah.
Yeah, in the meeting in Saudi Arabia, sorry. So what is the Secretary General's assessment of this development?
Look, on the bilateral relationships, we obviously have taken note of the report of the discussions between the Russian Federation and the U.S. As I said yesterday, we very much encourage dialogue and positive dialogue between all member states, but it's clear to all that the relationship between the Russian Federation and the United States as two permanent members of the Security Council is a very important one. Stefano.
Yes, two questions. Thank you, Stéphane. One about the speech that the Secretary General did at the Security Council. He spoke again about the necessity to reform the Security Council. He spoke about enlargement. This time, he never mentioned, he did not mention permanent seats, new permanent seats. In the past, he talked about new permanent seats. Does mean that he thinks that it's not anymore a good idea to expand?
No, not at all. And I think he was, just because the Secretary General doesn't mention every one of his positions every time he speaks, doesn't mean the positions have changed. He was in Addis Ababa over the weekend. He spoke about the need for a permanent seat for Africa in the Security Council. That position is unchanged.
Good. Okay, so another question is about an Ukrainian scholar. His name is Oleg Maltsev, and he's been arrested last September. Now, this is an international recognized scholar, and according, for example, to Human Rights Without Frontier, in this prison in Odessa, his condition, even the European Court of Human Rights said that the conditions are terrible, and now his health is a very bad state. Now, because he's been waiting for a trial, the question is, does the UN know anything about this situation?
Let me put it this way, Stefano. I'm not aware of this case. Send me an email with some details and I will look into it. Yes, sir.
About Afghanistan and Pakistan, there has been a resurgence of terrorism across the border. TTP and Pakistani army are having fights here and there on daily basis, and there are deaths occurring over there. Does Secretary General have got any idea to initiate any kind of multilateral dialogue or at the UN Security Council or elsewhere? Well, what does he think about this whole situation?
We're obviously concerned about the rise, about the violence that is occurring. I think it is important that member states and those in control of territories in their fight against terrorism do it actively, but within the bounds of international law, international human rights law. Okay. Yeah.
One party is believing in the international law, the other one is violating. So where does the UN Security Council stand?
Well, I think we'll see. Well, I can't speak for the Security Council. The Secretary General is stands against terrorism.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Hi. I have a brief follow-up on DRC. And as long as I understand, USG Lacroix will be in the region in South Sudan.
Sorry?
No, USG Lacroix?
Yeah.
He will be in the region in South Sudan.
Yes, he was going to South Sudan, Sudan, and Abyei.
Do you have any plan to visit?
I do not believe there is any travel plans for him to go to the DRC, but if that changes, I will let you know. We also hope, but pencil in that we have Bintu Keita, the head of the UN mission in the DRC, is a video guest on Friday, inshallah.
Benno.
Yes, Benno. I'll just make sure you knew your name.
Yes, no, still.
Still.
Regarding Ukraine, can the Secretary General understand that Ukraine is angry that they are not invited when Russia and the US are talking about peace in Ukraine?
Look, it is clear for us that any any solution to the conflict in Ukraine will need to involve both Ukraine and the Russian Federation. And for us, we'll need to be in line with our stated position, which is the respect for international law, relevant resolutions, UN resolutions, and of course the territorial integrity of Ukraine.
Can you remind me of the UN's position about a possible peacekeeping force in eastern Ukraine, if it's needed or?
Well, listen, I think
called for?
first of all, we need to have an agreement to end the conflict. You know, peacekeeping forces with a small p take all sorts of different shapes. There are UN peacekeeping forces, and you know, if any UN peacekeeping force is to be deployed, it has to be under Security Council resolution. Other conflicts have seen other international peacekeeping forces, I would say with a small p, deployed under different terms.
But would you be happy to help?
I think, listen, we will do whatever we can to help end the conflict in line with the Secretary General's oft-stated position. Thank you.